Okay, so welcome to part 2. So yeah, this time we're just gonna create our water object shader. And all this shader is, yeah, I'll actually demonstrate it. So in our ocean or water shader, I'm just gonna quickly swap it to a refraction shader so we can see the effect more clearly. So let me connect that guy and let's look at this. So as you can see here, I just have what I've got so far is just this object info node, which has this random output, which basically just gives you a random value between 0 and 1 per object. And then increase the contrast, just color ramp it and darken it a bit. And the reason I'm doing this, this process is that I can have the same diffuse shader across multiple objects, but they all have different colors. So that's all this part is. And the interesting part is this shader right here. So I'm gonna actually switch it to the final shader to preview it. So if you look into water, you first of all get absorption. So if I use my volume absorption, I get correct absorption with my objects as well, of course. But if I use my fake absorption, I also have to, of course, create fake absorption with my objects. So that's all this shader really does. So it does have multiple options, which are, first of all, you can create like I said, fake absorption, and you can also tint your object the further it goes into the water. And the other main option is the camera fall off, fake absorption or fade off. So all this does is that the further you zoom away, the more the surface gets absorbed or fades away. As you can see, that's what the effect that has, and the absorption preview shows, the more white it is, the more it fades off or gets absorbed in the water. So yeah, let's get started with creating this group. So I'm gonna switch it back to the water object shader, and as you can see again, I have this prepared group. So yeah, let's actually create it outside again. So the first thing I'm gonna do is create a light path node, and then create a math node, and create a geometry node. Let's see, input geometry. Okay, and let's actually duplicate the light path node. And okay, so I'm gonna explain this in just a second. So first off, I'm gonna connect my transmission ray to my ray length and multiply it, and then add a backfacing with my geometry node. So like this. So let's connect those guys. And the last step is multiplying our ray depth. Or actually, first I have to add a greater than output or node math node. So add a greater than and set it to 1.999. Okay. And connect that guy like this. Okay. So yeah, this is our basic setup, and now I'm gonna explain what it does. So if I view this first part, you can see we get this gradient. So the further an object is into the water, or the further it is into a refractive object, which is of course what we're seeing here. So again, like in the previous video, what happens during rendering is that a ray is shot. Let me draw that. So a ray is shot, and every time it bounces off a surface, this shader network gets evaluated. So again, the first bounce right here, let's say a ray from the camera hits it right here. It tests, is it a refractive, or is the ray a transmission ray? So is it a refractive ray? In this case, of course, it's not, because it comes directly from the camera. So this evaluates to 0, and that's why it's black. So what happens down here is the following. So if I actually just view the transmission ray on its own, you can see I just get this white effect. So the reason for that is, of course, again, the camera the camera shoots rays, goes through the surface, and then hits our object. So what that means is the ray is a transmission ray because we're now in a glass object or refractive object. And yeah, so this evaluates to 1, then multiplies with the ray length. So if I view that, you can see we now get a gradient from dark or from black to white the further we go into the water, because of course the ray length is greater the more you go into the water. Okay, so that's the explanation for this. The back facing just means that all the faces, let me zoom in on that for a second. So let's see if I can zoom in the correct part. Yeah, so back facing just means that any back face has the value of 1. So if I look beneath the surface, again, the camera, this is not a transmission ray, that's why it's black. But if I go into the object, all the back faces, so all the faces where the normals do not point forward or towards the camera. And here you can display your normals in edit mode in the right hand tab. Clicking this icon, yeah, all those faces are now have the value of 1, and they get added to this effect of the previous node. Okay, so again, what I have so far is the distance from black to white. The further the object goes into the refractive volume or refractive surface, the further I look into it. And I've just also added the back-facing value of 1. Okay, and the last part is just a limiting effect, or limitation. So all this does is it checks if the ray depth. So the ray depth is just an amount of bounces. So again, if the ray depth if 2 or 1.99 is greater than the ray depth. So what this means is that right here, again, if I take this ray, this would be bounce 0, and then it would bounce off, which would be bounce 1. But if I, let's say this ray right here, again, so bounce 0 right here, and then it bounces off and hits our object down here. So this would be bounce 1. And then it bounces off again, and which would be bounce 2. So what this greater than is saying is that all bounces that are greater than 1.99, which would in this example be this bounce, and then everything that comes later than this bounce to evaluate to, evaluate to 0. So what this means is that I'm basically mimicking the, let me take that, the is camera ray, but only limiting it to the transmission ray effect. So again, what this means is that all nodes do not see this setup. If I were to take this into a mix shader setup like this. So if I were to add like an emissive and a diffuse, let's plug those in right there and view that. So as you can see, if I turn this up to 10, the surrounding objects actually do not see this, because this effect is first of all limited only to the transmission ray, and then again limited to only the first and second bounce. So yeah, that's all this node setup is, and yeah, I'll actually come back to that in a second when we implement it to this node setup. So yeah, I'm just gonna copy these guys, and actually let me copy them and paste them right there. Okay. And let's hide that guy, and Okay, so I'm gonna duplicate this math node and plug it into the ray length node right there. So now we can increase or decrease our ray length, and let's plug that into our depth fade strength and control our fade strength. And again, duplicate a math node, plug that into the power, change the mode to power. So let's grab that. Excuse me. And let's take the bottom power value and plug it into our fall off. So again, all we're doing here is remapping the value. So since we don't want to limit ourselves to a 0 to 1 range, since we don't want to do that, we don't want to use a color ramp node or something similar like for example, RGB curves, because these are always only limited to 0 and 1. Okay, so now we've got that, and let's duplicate that guy again and change it to multiply. Let's see, multiply, and then let's plug, let's see where I have to plug this in. Yeah, the opacity value down here. And again, I'm just gonna duplicate this and change it to subtract, and then switch the inputs by pressing Alt S and then changing this to 1 and turning clamp on. So again, all this subtract node does is just invert the value. Okay, so now we've got that set up. So this is our opacity. Let me take that guy, and we can actually take this output now and plug it into our absorption preview node. And if I take that, and just to demonstrate this, I'm gonna plug our shader in right there, and let's just view our absorption shader. Let me hide that grease pencil stuff. Okay, so as you can see, we now have a working fake absorption. As you can see, I can change my fade strength, and I can change my fall off and my opacity. If I change my opacity to 1, this material has the default shader again, and if I change to 0, it has the fake absorption or fake fall off effect. Okay, so now we have to add the rest of the effects like color and camera fall off, and of course the whole mixing of all those effects. So I've already created these fake these mix factor nodes. So again, these are just like booleans or checkboxes. So again, it's just a greater than node, and it checks the value, and if it's if this group input is greater than 1, it then takes evaluates to 1, or else it will just evaluate to 0. This is just a workaround to get around to get a similar effect to booleans. Okay, so the next step is again to create a math node. I'm just gonna press Alt P and Alt D to unparent and unconnect that guy and change it to multiply, then connect this to here. And let's connect the multiply to our absorption mix factor. And then let's duplicate that multiply, and again duplicate that guy. Go to add and add those two nodes together. And then we're gonna create a mix shader right there. Plug that into our shader and get our shader from there. Okay, and then let's grab our transparent shaders, because of course we want to fade our objects. So let's grab that here. And let's connect that add into the mix factor, and now we should get a working effect. So as you can see, we now get our fake absorption. So if I set that from 1 to 0, I can turn it off and on. Let's check that preview. So if I turn down my fade strength, I can lower the effect. So as you can see, I get a bit of fading. Okay. And I'm just gonna quickly go back to this part up here. So let's do it like this. So again, the reason I'm actually adding the back-facing effect to this is following. So if I just mute that node so it gets skipped and then render it. Let me see if I can show you this. Let's turn up that color. Okay, so alright. Okay. So for now that doesn't change anything, but if I view my shader, let's see. Hope I didn't forget anything. Yeah, you can turn on clamp right here if you want to. Okay, so the reason, so this part up here is pretty logical. So again, we're just taking the distance and limiting the whole effect to our transmission rate. And then here we're adding our back face. So if we don't do that, we get this kind of weird fading effect because the back faces won't be transparent, and that's why I'm just adding the back face value to 1, so it always gets a transparent value. That's why I'm doing that. And I'm limiting the whole effect to the first bounce inside a transmission object, and the reason for that is let's see. So as you can see, this object is not touching the ground, and this object actually goes through the ground. So let's hide the ocean surface. And let's move that guy right there. And the reason I'm actually doing that is this part right here. So I'm limiting it because if I don't do that, so if I mute that, you can see I get this weird white effect. And so if I unmute that, again, what happens is that this transparent effect is only visible from the camera, and all the other objects just see this object as a regular object with its regular shader. So in this case, the scene just sees it as a diffuse shader, and we see it as a fading shader. So if I don't limit it, all the other objects also see it as a transparent shader, and then we get this weird effect right here. So it's more of a bug, and that's why I'm limiting it to get this more realistic effect. Alright, and as you can see, our objects have a bit of transparency too, but we're going to change that in just a second. Okay. So now we're gonna add our camera fall off. So let's grab actually I'm gonna do this outside of the node setup. So let's grab a camera data node, and let's view our view Z depth. So all this does is the closer we come to an object, the darker it gets, of course, because it basically just measures the distance from the camera to an object. So the closer you get, the lower the distance is, and then the lower distance, of course, has a lower shading value or a darker color. Alright, so first we're gonna remap that value again. So let's take a math node and change that to power. And first of all, let's just put that to -1. So we're kind of inverting our effect. So the closer it gets, the wider it gets in our case. So then let's duplicate that math node and change it to subtract. And let's switch the inputs and put that value to 1. Okay. And then let's take that guy and turn it to, again, create another power node, and let's plug that subtract value right there, and that other value will get a input later on in our group. And the last value we have to create is a multiply, which will also get a value in our group, and then again a multiply, and here we will limit the whole thing to our transmission ray. So let's grab a light path node and limit it to our transmission ray. Okay, so now we only have this effect with in refractive objects. Okay, so let's copy that node setup and let's paste that guy in here, and let's plug it in right there. See, can get the group to update. Okay, let's unconnect those guys and view our shader. Okay, so now we just have to connect our inputs and then we're almost done. So connect the depth to, let me see, yeah, depth to our power input and the opacity to our multiply input. And then let's take this and plug it into our, let's see, to this multiply node and change the or take the camera mix factor and plug it right here. So again, we can just turn on or toggle this effect, camera fall off effect. Now that you've got that done, we now have a better mix factor. And now the only thing left to do is just create this color fade option. So all you have to do for that is create a mix node, create a diffuse shader node, plug that in right there. Then let's take our, okay, let's see, yeah. Let's take our original shader and plug it into the other shading output, and let's plug that mix shader into our other mix shader. Okay, so yeah, a lot of connecting nodes right there. Okay, so last step is to just take a multiply node and plug that in right there, and take the multiply node and plug it into our color opacity and our color into the diffuse color. Okay, so yeah, that should do it, I think. So let's view our result. Okay, something is not right, so let me just quickly go over the nodes. Alright, so all I forgot, of course, is to add control the mix factor right here. So all we have to do is just, yeah, this is actually plugged in wrong. So just take this multiply, plug it in there, and let's take our shader again and plug it in there. And also just connect this camera fall off to our camera fall off preview output. So that should do it, I hope. And as you can see, it now works. So let's again just test our fake absorption, and as you can see, it works. I can also tweak it, so I can tweak the fade strength, and I can also tweak our fall off. And I can also preview it, so look something like that. If I want camera fall off, I can turn that on. I turn that distance down, as you can see, if I zoom in, I get I get less transparency, and if I zoom out, I get more transparency. So this is obviously way too exaggerated, so I'm just gonna increase that value again, or I have to decrease it. Let's see. Yeah, something like that. Okay, so yeah, that basically concludes our shading tutorial for this part. And in our last part, we're actually, let me see, okay, don't have it in this file directly for now. we're actually just gonna create a quick little script in which we can control or in which we can add our water object and our water ocean shader to objects in a quick fashion. So of course this would be really useful if you, let's say, had like a boat with like 100 materials, and of course you don't want to go through each material and add our water object shader, so the script just automates that process. Okay, so see you in the third part.